Well, the way we tried to introduce was essentially this linear journey of Louise, and her non-linear journey is that the linear journey is super procedural, right? It's the way we make films, in and out moves, static frames on ultra primes that had K35 coatings, but ultra primes that have a particular sharpness to them. They're at a 1.9, so you're going to get plenty of fall off. Obviously on the XT, you're going to get plenty of fall off, but you still had quite a bit of information in the frame. And in 235, again, that's that beautiful format of the balance between body and space. We frame things so you have plenty of space around the face, but the fall off is not as aggressive. The distance between camera and subject isn't as close. We stay back a little bit. Very observational, very procedural. When we're bending time, it's a very different engagement. It's handheld, right? It's me with the Alexa M. The Mini wasn't available then, but it's me with the Alexa M, shooting from my hip as if they were family portraits, right? Very classic, medium format, from the hip, shooting family. I use super speed, so now I'm able to shoot at a 1.3, which gives us more extreme depth of field, more distortion, more fall off. On the 35 mil, which happens to be one of the beautiful lenses in that set because it has really virtuous close focus value. So I could be 6 inches, a few inches from the face, even if the eye wasn't in focus, if the ear was in focus, it still worked because that's what those scenes needed. It needed that imperfect bending of time, bending of focus. So those things we picked two different formats. We picked two different lensing sensibilities and two different kinds of lenses that would give us very different value and would allow you to create that relative relationship between the linear reality of the film and the sort of the cyclical bending reality of the film. So yeah, I mean, I enjoy doing that in films, employing multiple tools, multiple formats, especially in the digital age, lenses that patina your image in a particular way. I love using a ragtag set of lenses to be expressive, and I also love have begun to really love the idea of picking one focal length. So pick that one focal length and live within the straits of that one focal length and never break it, and see how that also patinas the film. The way we created a relative relationship between time in the film, we also had to create a relative relationship between light in the film, and part of that relationship is a relationship of relativity, and part of that relationship is the play between light and dark. And that in this film, it was about following Louise into a space where she could attain a certain level of enlightenment, a certain realization of who she is. So everyday Tuesday morning life that Denis likes to call it had to be what he would call a dirty sci-fi, which is super mundane, very gray, very underlit, very simple, and that as she grew closer and closer and closer to the ship, things start to open up. The lighting starts to open up, the frames start to open up a little bit more, which then gives us as the audience the ability to have some relief in that we know that ship has a very firm intentionality, which is it's a temple. It's a place where she discovers herself. She discovers her own questions of life and death, time and space. And so we had to create in the other parts of the story this very low-key textural quality, so that when we got to the ship, we were all experiencing the same amount of relief that Louise experiences when she's in front of that light. It had to blind us as much as it blinded her. It had to feel as good to us as much as it felt good to her. And so the only way I felt like you could do that is to really bury the rest of the film, put all the other film in the tow, so that when she stood in front of that screen, although it may be exposure, it feels super bright relative to everything else that came before that that's very dark. Yeah, I mean, Kubrick is, it goes without saying that even in every other film that Denis and I have done without one another in our own personal practice, Stanley Kubrick is a very important voice in our practice. And the monoliths, the idea of the monolith as it pertains to Kubrick doesn't necessarily apply the same way we're using it, but it's still an homage, it's still a tipping of the hat to what that is, which is in our own primal life, something mundane, plain, but sophisticated because it has a particular level of intentionality to it that we're not of an understanding of in our current in current time, how reflection, how us paying attention to that monolithic thing that has such futuristic intentionality can really change the course of mankind. So when the primal beings in 2001 are literally beating each other with bones, and this thing from the heavens drops to the earth, and the monkeys, the primal beings, look at it, what they're doing is that they're seeing they're not just seeing a foreign object, what they're seeing is a total realization of themselves. It's a projection of their future. And I think that's very much present in Arrival, that when the ships land, it doesn't have to be a total realization of what our imagination would be. All it has to be is an interesting projection of the future. And I think that's what makes it. That's where Kubrick is very much present in our film. Well, in Arrival, there's no the hazmat suit is like the protective gear for a familiar environment, but a very much alien environment. So it looks as alien in real time on Earth as it looks very alien inside the alien vessels. And so it had to be its own thing. It had to be its own environment. And so what we ended up doing was we tried versions where we didn't light the face at all, where we would allow natural light to light the face as it would, and we would allow ourselves to never see their face until they actually faced the screen. And the problem was that the reflectivity of one mask underneath and another imperfect mask on top didn't really allow us to dig through all the highlights and the shadows, so we had to add light. And what we did was that we just took the helmet, which is essentially an oxygen mask, and we added the gaffer and the costume designer, Renee April, who's amazing, incredible costume designer, who's worked with Denis quite a bit. We worked together to put LEDs, remotely controlled LEDs, bicolor LEDs inside the helmet with a strip of Depron just around them. So they were photographable. You didn't mind seeing the little dots in frame, but they were softened a little bit, obviously, to make it better looking on the face, and also made it better, more interesting to look at. So they were added to the helmets, and we had total remote control of them. I could dim them up, dim them down. I could change. They were bicolor, so I could go daylight or tungsten with them. And it was a real revelation of, like, I would say 95% of the film is lit with LEDs. There were a few moments where we would bounce HMIs, and there were, obviously, you'll see in some of those moments where we're bending time and we just want something more naturalistic. I use quite a bit of tungsten, incandescent light. But, you know, that film is an LED-driven film, and most of the tent, the spaceship, all of the tent, and all of the spaceship were lit by LEDs. You know, you pull out with the dolly, but you zoom in, or you zoom in. You know, you zoom out with the dolly, you zoom out with the lens, and you push in with the camera. To be honest with you, most of that was added in post, but it was that sequence of them in the zero and gravity environment was to really push home this idea of vertigo, disorientated reality when you're in alien space. And so it's just a wonderful opportunity for us to, like, redefine gravity, redefine the human experience in an alien environment. And Denis' brilliance, along with Patrice, along with Sam, our storyboard artist, came up with some beautiful concepts and how we could have an experience. The audience, again, could experience what it was like to enter into an alien environment, and if the gravity shifted and human gravity shifted, what would that be like? And so we're using those tropes, really, but effective tropes, and in a way to give the audience vertigo. This film is really about a real-time. It's an experiential film. It's about us experiencing, trying to, as much as we can, in two-dimensional cinema, experiencing everything we might experience if we actually step foot into an alien ship. The only thing that's missing in the film is smell and taste, you know. Essentially what we decided to do, and what Denis, Sam, Patrice, and I decided to do, is give ourselves another chance to flip the world upside down, the ship upside down, and give Louise another experience. And it really is about her experiencing a certain realization of herself. So that environment, again, was another environment where we could play with gravity. We could play with air. What kind of environment do the aliens live in? Would it be could it be hospitable for us, or is it only hospitable for Louise? Right, so you get to play with those things. It draws questions. Is she alien? Is she an alien life? So just go. So what it gave us was a wonderful opportunity to change the way the audience experienced the film. A film that was so dark, and you got glimpses of light. Now we're in the light, and what that would look like. And so we didn't shoot any of it underwater. The hair was all done later, but we lit it in a very austere way, very humble, very flat, so that we could take advantage of smoke, atmosphere, and it gave Denis and Joe and Patrice another opportunity to not make the aliens presentational, right? Which was key, is that at the end of the story, you know what the aliens look like, but it's still a mystery, right? It still wasn't about a big alien reveal. It was still about Louise's perspective. If she was in that environment, it was filled with gas. How much of it could she really see? So it took a lot of balance, and it's all CG environment, mainly CG. It took a lot of kind of balance and hard work to figure out how much you take away, how much you add, how extreme would we go with some things. But it was that's the most CG scene in the whole film, and it's grown on me. It's grown on me a lot. I've grown to appreciate its value relative to the rest of the film, because the rest of the film is so dark, so gray, so muddy. Yes. I think the film could have its own particular resonance in the times that we are living in now. But all good art has always done that. It creates a vibration that makes us question and have real legitimate questions for the world that we live in. It's hard for me to say in which way it can be part of the conversation. That would be very presumptuous for me to assume that it would even be considered in a conversation. But I feel inspired and privileged to have made the film, because it's saying something. It's trying to say something.